The share market has its best day in nearly 6 weeks as the banks and miners lead the bourse higher. Qantas's rankings among global airlines falls to its lowest level in a decade, and boom time for avocado growers. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Wednesday, the 26th of June, 2024. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. Today's show, an eclectic mix of stories, something for everyone, I reckon.
Oh, when we go from the share market to airlines to avocados and a bunch of things in between, it is going to be a ripper. Let's get into the big story, the main story this morning, Sean. The ASX 200 had its best day in almost 6 weeks with big jumps in energy stocks, the big miners, property groups and financials, including the big banks.
What was particularly notable yesterday was the tech stocks did worst of all. For most of this year, it's been the tech stocks that have held the market together on the back of the artificial intelligence and cloud computing boom. By the close yesterday, the S&P ASX 200 was 1.4% higher to 7,839 points. Some big stocks did really well yesterday. Some of these haven't done so well this year. James Hardie is a good example. It jumped 5%. Now for the year, it's down about 12%, but its fortune's very much right on the back of the outlook for the US property market. That's improving. Good for James Hardie. Woodside benefited from the recent rise in the oil price, and it closed nearly 4% higher. Fellow oil and gas giant Santos finished up nearly 2%, riding that same wave. Mining giants BHP and Rio Tinto were also up 2%, but again, the big banks really buoyed the market. When 4 of the top 10 stocks are the 4 big banks, if the banks do well, the market does well. Commonwealth Bank yesterday hit another all-time high of $128.68 a share. It's now up 13% this year. National Australia Bank hit a new 9-year peak of $36.72 a share. It's up nearly 19% since January. While the past couple of sessions haven't been good for the tech stocks, there's still plenty of confidence in the local market with growing expectations that interest rates will ultimately fall rather than rise. Now, we'll get an insight into that today when the monthly consumer price index figures come out. We're all hoping that's not too high. If it's not too high, then the chances of a rate cut this year increase somewhat.
And Sean, of course, we'll be able to hear your thoughts on that after the data comes out. We'll be putting out the Fear and Greed weekly newsletter, which you can sign up for now at fearandgreed.com.au. It comes out once a week and just so happens to be on a Wednesday, which means that we can do it so that you get to hear Sean Aylmer's opinion on everything, including those inflation figures.
See, people in my household really are sick of my opinion. So I'm enjoying putting it in the newsletter. So I've got someone else, sort of a captured audience or something.
Oh, it's fantastic, isn't it? Well, it's an easy thing to do and it's free to sign up. fearandgreed.com.au, and you will get that mid-morning after that data has been released. We will bake it fresh straight after that. Now, Sean, you mentioned the tech stocks. They're the one we've been talking about for months, is chipmaker NVIDIA. It's had a rough few days, hasn't it? With $430 billion in value. That's just a staggering number. $430 billion US in value lopped off over the past 3 sessions.
Yeah, that's about 650 billion Aussie dollars. So that's what it's lost. Now, 650 billion Aussie dollars is more than the combined value of Australia's 3 biggest companies, BHP, Commonwealth Bank and CSL. NVIDIA has fallen 13% in the past 3 sessions. It's now the number 3 company on Wall Street, behind Microsoft and Apple. Mind you, its share price is still up 145% this year. Simply because NVIDIA is so big, the sell-off now ranks as the biggest on record over 3 days for one company in dollar terms. Now, in the past couple of sessions, there's been chat about the artificial intelligence boom kind of somewhat being over-egged and the stocks being somewhat overvalued. Investors are wondering whether there's just a little too much froth around some of these AI companies. They're also questioning whether NVIDIA specifically is too expensive. Maybe there are other cheaper AI-related companies out there. Some of those stocks have actually done pretty well. Certainly, NVIDIA has been sold off big time over the past 3 sessions.
Sean, while we're on the topic of investing, you've got an interesting interview coming up after the show with Cameron Blanks, the Managing Director of Pacific Equity Partners.
Yeah, so Pacific Equity Partners is one of the original private equity groups in Australia. And it's just good to get a bit of a 101 on private equity and investing in private credit via private equity. So increasingly there are funds available where you might want to invest 50,000 or 100,000 or something like that in private equity. So that's what we're talking to Cameron about. It's really fascinating. We go into the sorts of things that they look for in a stock. We go into why you might invest in private equity, diversification benefits, stuff like that. So certainly for investors, it is a great chat.
Yeah, and I think I liked most was that Cameron gave some examples of the businesses that they've been involved with in the past, including, I think, Peter's Ice Cream, where they actually helped that company to double its profit. And it was just a great story, and he told it really well.
Yeah, they bought that off Nestle, and they turned it around and then sold it for a big profit. And that's basically how private equity are trying to make money. Take an asset which is undervalued, turn it around, sell it for a lot more, and investors get the rewards.
Yeah, it's a good interview with a good supporter of the podcast. Now, Sean, you've given us the rundown on the local market. Was there much corporate news around yesterday?
Oh, Michael, always plenty of corporate news around. Paladin Energy's share price fell 5% after it said it had made a takeover bid for Toronto-listed Fission Uranium. Pathology group Helios rose slightly following a results update. Specialty dairy company Synlait Milk tumbled 10%. After warning it could tip into insolvency if shareholders reject a critical $120 million loan. That will do it. And billionaire Czech businessman Pavel Tykak's plans to buy a majority stake in ASX-listed coal miner Coronado Global Resources has collapsed after his family office, Seven Global Investments, that's SEV.EN, no idea why they spell it that way, Seven Global Investments, well, it failed to secure Foreign Investment Review Board approval to invest in Coronado. Seven had agreed to buy 51% of the miner from Energy and Minerals Group, which is a US-based private equity firm that actually put together the miner originally, floated back in 2018 on the ASX. Anyway, FIRB has said no, so who knows where that one goes.
And what's happening in international markets?
Oil prices are on the rise, with Brent crude hitting a 2-month high of over $86 a barrel. It's up more than 5% this month. Gold prices are down a touch. Bitcoin's rebounded after a couple of rough sessions. It's fetching $61,000 per unit. The Aussie dollar's buying 66.6 US cents. Exciting, isn't it? And on Wall Street, the non-tech stocks are doing pretty well. So the S&P 500 closed flat yesterday, but the NASDAQ was sold off big time. Think Nvidia. In fact, it notched its biggest one-day loss in almost 2 months yesterday morning.
Brent crude hitting a 2-month high. That's not good news for petrol prices, is it?
It's not, though. You know, go to the ACCC website, because I have tried so hard to marry Brent crude prices with petrol prices, but the lag seems to change. And so even as certainly they're connected, but then there's a cyclical nature to it. Like right now, along the East Coast, petrol prices, I'd say, are medium. They're not low, but they're not high either. Like, so we're coming off the cycle. And so you're right. I don't know, Michael.
I don't know. And I've been waiting so long for them to drop, expecting them to drop. I have 24 kilometers of fuel left in the car. Like, I now get to a hill and I just have to roll down it in neutral and hope that I'm going to be... it's become now just a matter of principle in that I'm not going to buy it until they drop a little bit. And if it means I can't drive up hills for a little while, then so be it.
Yeah, well, I think now's not a bad time. So you're on the East Coast, you're in Sydney, so it's actually not a bad time to buy petrol. Not the cheapest, but certainly not the most expensive.
Oh, some fantastic advice. And there'll be more advice like that, hopefully much, much better in today's edition of the Fear and Greed newsletter. So don't forget to sign up at the website. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is due back in Australia today after agreeing to plead guilty to a single criminal count of conspiring to obtain and disclose classified US national defence documents.
Overnight, Mr. Assange was on a flight to the Northern Mariana Islands, a US territory in the Western Pacific, where he is due to appear in the Saipan court. He's due to be sentenced to 62 months of time already served. Now, Saipan is the capital of the territory. The deal does need to be approved by the local judge. That hearing is 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Time this morning. Assange left the UK after being bailed by the UK High Court Back in 2010, WikiLeaks released hundreds of thousands of classified US military documents on Washington's wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, the largest security breaches of their kind in US military history, along with swathes of diplomatic cables. Assange was indicted during the Trump administration over the mass release of the documents, which were actually leaked by a woman called Chelsea Manning. She was a former US military intelligence analyst. She was also prosecuted. Initially, Assange was actually arrested over alleged sex crimes in Sweden. Then in June 2012, he entered Ecuador's embassy in London. He was there for 7 years. In April 2019, he was removed from the embassy and charged with skipping bail. He spent most of the last 5 years at London's top security Belmarsh prison, fighting extradition to the US. Anyway, a deal has finally been done. There's been heavy lobbying by Australian politicians, including the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. And this afternoon, I think he should be back on Australian soil.
Sean, consumer sentiment is rising, which is good for the economy, though households remain pessimistic about the economy.
The Westpac Melbourne Institute Consumer Sentiment Index rose to 83.6 points, but that remains well below the neutral level of 100, meaning pessimists outnumber optimists by nearly 20 percentage points. The good news from all the budget initiatives are being negated by increased concerns about inflation and the outlook for interest rates. The survey shows that half of consumers expect mortgage rates to rise over the next 12 months. When asked, survey respondents recalled things like budget and tax, inflation, news on those types of things more than anything else.
Qantas, I mentioned this at the top of the show, has fallen to its lowest ranking in more than a decade among global airlines, with Fiji Air coming in top among the region's carriers.
The Skytrax Awards, which are the industry benchmark, puts Qantas at number 24 in the world, down from 17 last year. Rex came in at 50, Virgin Australia at 54. Jetstar was the 75th best airline. The rankings consider comfort, cuisine, in-flight audio and video entertainment, service, the aircraft fleet, plus other things. Qantas has been struggling to recover from a pretty shocking 2023 that ultimately forced CEO Alan Joyce to retire early. New Chief Executive Vanessa Hudson pledged $230 million in spending to fix customer pain points, including its onboard meals, lounges, and introducing Wi-Fi on ageing fleets. Earlier this year, she said the airline's net promoter scores were trending positively after last year's horror showing, though clearly, based on these rankings, there's still a way to go. Number one in the world was Qatar Airways. It beat Singapore Airlines to be named the world's best, with Emirates taking out third position. Then Michael, ANA All Nippon, Cathay Pacific, Japan Airlines and Turkish Airlines. Fiji Air came in at 14. Good on Fiji Air. I have flown Fiji Air in the last couple of years. Fantastic airline. I was
about to say the same thing. I flew on Fiji Airways last year to, well, funnily enough, Fiji. And I thought it was great. And they don't sponsor us or anything. We would be very, very happy to accept them as a sponsor of Fear and Greed and, hey, do a show from Fiji.
Shameless, Michael, shameless. I'm going to drop that line of conversation.
Oh, okay.
But they are a great airline.
I was about to start praising their food and their in-flight entertainment and how comfortable the seats are and all that, but Sean, just you go on. You do your thing.
I will say, so my daughter flew Fiji Air to Fiji and then to Canada, so an even longer flight. She thought it was great. Anyway, all for Fiji Air coming in at number 14. Air New Zealand was 22. The awards are judged by customers from 100 countries, and the 350 participating airlines don't pay to appear in the survey, so it's a pretty rigorous process.
Now, Sean, back on track, billions of dollars of investment in wind farms. I say that as though it's your fault that we went off track.
Did we go off track, though? Did we?
Well, a little bit. It became a shameless commercial plug to try and convince Fiji Airways to advertise with us.
Yeah.
But anyway, we are back on track.
Good.
Billions of dollars of investment in wind farms has been unable to boost energy generation during the June quarter, contributing to the squeeze on East Coast gas supplies.
Electricity generation from wind farms in the national electricity market since April 1 is roughly flat compared with the same quarter in 2021, despite about 2,500 megawatts of wind capacity having been added since then. That's according to an analysis by electricity market watcher Global Rome, reported in the AFR. Since 2020, wind power capacity has increased by about half, or almost 4,000 megawatts, but total production of electricity from wind this June quarter may only be up 15%, with the current quarter heading towards being the lowest output since 2017. Now, this actually brings to the fore one of the big issues, particularly in winter. Energy advisors have for a long time been warning about the risk of a renewables drought in winter months, where there's prolonged periods when both solar and wind power generation are actually subdued. A problem when we are trying to get rid of our energy dependency on coal-fired power stations and gas. Clearly, this adds to the argument that gas is going to have to hang around as a transition energy source for some time.
Sean, the federal government has dropped its ban on vapes and will only allow registered pharmacists to sell them.
Sounds a bit ironic to me that pharmacies sell vapes. So too the Pharmacy Guild of Australia. They think it's ironic because they oppose the idea. Individual chemists can decide if they want to carry vapes or not. The notion is that pharmacies sell vapes to help people quit smoking rather than for recreational use. The original legislation was for people could only get a vape if they had a doctor's prescription. That's been watered down. Health Minister Mark Butler said pharmacists are already stocking vapes, and the watering down of initial plans is a sensible balance between access and serious reform. He said chemists would have to be able to demonstrate that vapes sold comply with standards set by the Therapeutic Goods Administration. Interesting. Buy your vape from a chemist. Doesn't seem to make much sense to me.
No, certainly doesn't, actually. Times are getting tougher, Sean, for Collins Foods, owner of fast food group KFC, as customers cut back spending.
Higher mortgage bills, rents and energy bills, as well as inflation, are all eating into consumer spending, and Collins Foods, including the 279 KFC outlets, reported same-store sales nearly 1% lower than last year. The outlook for the coming year isn't much better, according to Interim Chief Executive Kevin Perkins. The group looked closely at introducing more bundling of menu items and special offers to help families under pressure with household budgets. There was some better news in the Taco Bell side of the business, with same-store sales up over the last year. Mind you, the rollout of the Taco Bell stores has been temporarily suspended. Overall, Collins Foods' net profit jumped 500%. Sounds a lot, but it went from not much to $77 million. It did have record revenue, though. That's the good news. Collins Foods' share price has tumbled 25% so far this year, or at least that was until yesterday morning. Yesterday's announcement was actually better than expected. Its share price closed up 7.5%. In fact, it was the best of the top 200 for the session.
A very exciting story, Sean. The avocado crop this financial year is up about 20% to a record 139,000 tonnes. And the good news for growers is that increasing export demand will soak up some of that extra supply.
Oh, very exciting. The Rabobank Global Avocado Update 2024, which I know you've been waiting for, says the growth in production is driven by more than 1,500 hectares of avocado planting expected to reach maturity this year. There's another 4,000 hectares of orchards maturing in the next 5 years. There will be avocados everywhere. While the local market is oversupplied, hence the relatively low prices of avocados, the export market at 13% of production is growing, according to Rabobank. Hong Kong, Singapore and Malaysia are big buyers of Aussie avocados. Also, there's growth in Japan, or from Japan as well. Avocados are considered a powerhouse superfood, Michael. We've talked about this before. Healthy fats, anti-aging, disease-fighting antioxidants, nearly 20 vitamins and minerals. You know, the avocado growers all talk about the health benefits around weight loss, heart illness, diabetes, gut health, brain function, eyesight. We love a good avocado, but I have a question for you, Michael.
Oh, go on. Oh, you know I hate it when you ask me questions. I just break out in a sweat. Please, go on.
So, it's quite a logical answer if you know the answer, but if you don't know the answer, it's probably not. There's one very dominant player in the world avocado export market.
Okay, so a country that grows more and exports more. Mexico. It'll be Mexico.
Yes, well done. Well done.
And
Genius.
You know how I know, and it's not Google. It is because they are always advertising during the Super Bowl. You know those avocados from Mexico ads as the catchphrase?
Yes.
Avocados from Mexico. It's a little jingle, and I'm not going to sing it because I'm not going to embarrass myself. But the Super Bowl has taught me one thing.
Avocados from Mexico. So the US are the biggest consumers of avocados. Avocados don't travel particularly well. So if you look at our local export markets, Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, Japan, Mexico, they're right next to the biggest consumers of avocados, the US, hence they're the biggest exporters. There you go.
I can't even get an avocado home from Woolworths without bruising it. I don't think I'm going to be able to go in from Mexico.
And don't you think that with the avocado, there's probably a 3-hour window where it's perfect?
Oh, yeah. And sometimes that 3-hour window will happen kind of from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. or something, and you miss it.
Totally.
You go to bed and the avocado is rock hard. You wake up in the morning and it's just mushy and soft. And you're like, God, it happened overnight.
Shouldn't have left the heater on.
Yeah, indeed. All right, Sean, moving on. International news time. Apple is imposing unfair restrictions on developers of applications for its App Store in violation of a new EU law that's meant to encourage competition in the tech sector, according to European regulators.
Apple's the first company to be charged with violating the Digital Markets Act, a law passed a couple of years ago that gives European regulators wide authority to force the largest online gatekeepers, as they put it, to change their business practices, according to a report in the New York Times. The EU rules threaten to fragment the global tech market as companies delay the release of certain products and services because of regulatory concerns. So last week, Apple said it wouldn't release a software update for iPhone users in the EU that included new artificial intelligence features because of what it called regulatory uncertainty. Meta didn't release Threads, its Twitter-like service, in the block until 5 months after it was available in the US for similar reasons. No doubt the EU regulators have been most aggressive in taking on the big tech platforms. These most recent charges further escalate the tussle between Apple, which it has always argued its products are designed in the best interest of customers, between Apple and the EU regulators, who say the company's unfairly using its size and considerable resources to stifle competition. This is a familiar argument for us in Australia and in North America and other parts of the world. So we're all going to be watching this one very, very closely.
You know who'd be able to get an avocado from Mexico to Australia without bruising it, Sean? Fiji Airways.
Fiji Airways.
Smoothest flight I've ever had.
I wonder whether they fly to Mexico.
I don't know. I mean,
Nardi
seems like a
to Mexico
minor,
City.
Irrelevant detail.
Yeah,
Sean.
right. Apologies.
That's fine.
They would be able to do it, though.
Oh, they would. You could strap it into its own seat. It would be treated like a silkworm. Sean. Up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview with Cameron Blanks, Managing Director of Pacific Equity Partners, a great supporter of the podcast.
All about investing in private equity, and we're not talking about the big end of town. We're talking about sophisticated investors, people who know what they're doing, and they've got but you don't have to have hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this. So we ask about, who should invest in private equity, what are the benefits of it, and then he gives us some of the examples of what Pacific Equity Partners have done over the years. Yeah,
it's a good chat. It's up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au, which is where you sign up for the free weekly newsletter out today. Also out today, How Do They Afford That? The new episode of our sister podcast, all about making your money work harder for you. Today's topic, I know I've talked too much this show, Sean, so I'm just going to keep this very brief. Today's episode is all about investor clubs. Is it worth joining an investment club where you kind of pool your money and everyone kind of invests in the same thing and you learn as you go? We go into the pros and the cons and the benefits and the potential risks as well of that. You'll find that wherever you listen to podcasts. I'll put a link in today's show notes as well. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Wednesday, the 26th of June, 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.